Welcome to Achieving Global Transformation. My name is John Esposito. I work within the professional services practice of Salesforce.com as a high-tech services lead. And we have two great speakers today from BMC and Seagate. I'm going to introduce them shortly. But no presentation is complete without first reviewing our safe harbor agreement. But with that said, we'll get right into it. So you're going to hear about two very different projects today, but from a scoping perspective. But from a delivery perspective, the challenges, especially on a global transformation project, were very, very similar, if not the same. Right? I think we're already all familiar with these limited budgets, limited resources, having diverse stakeholders, particularly on a global scale, not just from a functional perspective, but from a regional perspective. And of course, a global project can also seem insurmountable, right? And just understanding where to start can often be a task. And then, of course, technology itself can be a big bottleneck, right? Because oftentimes the business wants to move much faster than the technology can. So I'm going to go over a couple what I consider key core principles that we see and to be very successful, and some of the differentiators with implementing on demand, for example. And I think you'll see that within our case study stories that you're going to hear from today. These are key core principles to consider and to adopt when you embark on your projects. Right? The first and foremost is to recognize that implementing Salesforce.com is considerably different from implementing traditional on-premise software. You should be looking to adopt what we consider a fast and iterative approach. We generally deploy in weeks versus months, or months versus years. And the primary differentiator for that is because we can figure via clicks versus code, right, for most of our projects. So not only do you deliver time to value much quicker, but probably the biggest advantage is your ability to mitigate and manage the risk, right, because your deployment model is much more flexible. You can adjust and respond to changing business needs as opposed to our traditional longer duration projects, right, where you lock down the requirements, and by the time you deliver, there's a lot more change involved. It could be a shock and awe effect, and the business often changes. So then you're always forever behind. Having said that, important to think about it in a long-term perspective. And when I say long-term within the Salesforce world, generally you think about a roadmap that might take you a year, 6 months, a year, 18 months, generally not much longer. But it's very important to consider doing this and building consensus around it, because this is really the primary tool. And this is just an example. This isn't necessarily one size fits all. But this is a very, very important tool. You think about your roadmap, because that's really what's going to help drive the consensus with all the different stakeholders, particularly on a global project. Getting an understanding and defining the end state. What do you expect to achieve in the end state? That's often actually the easier part of the exercise. But working with your stakeholders to identify what the right priority is. Right? Where are you going to start? Let's be honest about the current state of the environment and the business, and what's the right phasing plan. So leaders from the marketing group, for example, will get an understanding of where they fit within the bigger picture. And although they might be on a third release, for example, it's often much quicker than a traditional method. And so there's a lot more consensus building, and that's really important, because with the project team and as you deliver, right, people can be very, very focused on that first release or the release at hand, as opposed to the stakeholders being worried about getting all their stuff in, thus getting back to the prior slide where you end up building up a much longer project. The last and final really core component to consider, and this will be a determining factor in just how fast you can move and also maintain the quality. And because when you start working with the platform like Salesforce.com, I mean, if you don't have an appreciation to it yet, you'll learn to understand that you really can move as fast as the business wants to, which is a considerable paradigm shift from what we're used to today. So it's very, very important to have that governance model. There's a lot of key pieces within this slide here. first and foremost, IT and business need to be collaborative. They need to work together. You need the stakeholders from the various marketing, the various functional departments to participate to help drive that consensus like I showed you on a previous slide. You need the various sponsors from the IT side to make sure you're thinking about the right architecture and the approach. And of course, you want to come out of that with defining the roadmap, defining and rationalizing what the appropriate level of standardization is. Right? Thinking about a global project, oftentimes we hear we want everything to be standard. That's a goal, but regions, various channels will have differences, and you're going to want to allow them to have those differences where it makes sense so they maintain their competitive advantage. The other very, very important part of this is to recognize the executive sponsorship. Right? In order to move and be decisive and make decisions, you really need to support sponsorship, active sponsorship. And then a last component on this is pointing out is the BU administrator. So big difference. Another big difference I consider we see is that when you have the on-demand platform, there are a lot more tasks now that don't have to go through IT. You can delegate and typical tasks like reporting is a good example, or dashboards. That can go out to the business unit administrators. That can go out to power users. Those types of tasks no longer need to go through the IT shop or be part of the development lifecycle. With that said, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Burke Butler from BMC. And then after Burke, Parajat Sharma will come up and speak about the Seagate story.
Which one advances this one? Right here. Okay. Good morning. My name is Burke Butler. I work with BMC Software. It is particularly meaningful for me to be here today because a year ago, I was sitting in the audience thinking about becoming a Salesforce.com customer. And I was wondering, can the platform meet our business needs and do it quickly? And we got the management backing, and earlier this year, we did a 90-day sprint, and we fundamentally transformed the way we run front office operations at BMC Software. And I'm here to tell you that story today, and I'm going to tell you it's a fun story to tell. So that's what we're going to do. BMC Software quickly is recognized globally as the leader in business service management. We're a little over $1.8 billion last fiscal year. We did our deployment in 90 days, reached over 1,450 users in 40 countries. We're working with Salesforce automation, customizable forecasting, displaying assets and entitlements to our end users to help them do their jobs better. And multi-language, multi-currency was very important to us because we were reaching out to users in 40 different countries. So, you guys are at a technology conference. You got to wonder why there's a picture on the board that has caterpillars and cocoons and butterflies. What's all this about? So I was reading a story to my 4-year-old daughter about 2 weeks ago, and the name of the story was "Caterpillar into a Butterfly." And as I read about that transformation from a caterpillar into a butterfly, I recognized that there were some amazing similarities to what we did at BMC Software in our 90-day sprint earlier this year. So the way that the similarities worked out were that in the cocoon phase, the story of the transformation of the caterpillar into a butterfly is that the caterpillar willingly accepts the end of one life as we know it and goes into a cocoon. And then inside the cocoon, the seeds of life, of new life, spring out and ultimately transform into a butterfly. And when I relate that back to BMC Software, the cocoon phase, recognizing the end of one life form as we knew it, moving to a new one, it was a recognition that we need to separate ourselves from legacy processes and embrace the idea of change. Best practice recommendations from a best-in-class vendor like BMC Software, or BMC Software, like Salesforce.com, and be willing to lead change. And out of the cocoon, spring the seeds of new life. And those came in the form of committed project leads and agents of change all around the world who were committed to fundamentally simplifying the way we run front office operations at BMC Software. And as we progressed, we were able, and as the butterfly started to show its face in the new world, we were able to leverage the power of the platform, and by getting into these conference room pilots with end users and showing them these quick iterations and rapid evolutions of how we can meet your needs more quickly, and really getting their buy-in to what we were doing. And then when it was time for the butterfly to truly emerge, we had it covered because we engaged the change management leaders across the organization early on in the project, and they were willing to lead the change. So as I read that book to my daughter, I thought about the amazing similarities in what we did in a 90-day sprint. So there's the setup for what we're going to talk about the next 10 minutes or so. Hope I can keep your attention because of my caterpillar into a butterfly theme here. So here's where we were, and you've seen it before. This is nothing unusual. We had a legacy environment that was difficult to update. It was heavy. It had accumulated over the years, and fundamentally it was slow and did not meet end user expectations. BMC Software has grown through acquisition over the last couple of years, and we had a number of different user groups that were on different platforms and different processes, and we didn't have a single way of seeing what's going on in sales. You've heard this story before. And when we looked at the potential vendors that could get us all in one house, it was clear to us that Salesforce.com was the right answer. So I give my senior management all of the credit for the vision and the top objectives they laid out. They said, we're going to create a system, we're going to get everybody in one house following one specific business process, and we're going to focus on sales rep productivity. Anything else is going to stand in line behind that. Okay? It's all about the sales rep. And then, like any large organizations or any organization, there are some downstream dependencies, right? The things that happen in our Salesforce automation tool have some impact on the back office, and we need to be mindful that we do not interrupt any of those processes. Guiding principles of the project: keep it simple, guys, and you got to stand firm like a rock in order to keep things simple. It's tough to do, easy to say, but senior management had the vision that we're going to nail our core functionality. We're going to focus on making life better on the sales rep, and anybody else who asks for something to be included in this project just might have to wait in line and go somewhere, go next. This is all about sales reps, and what we were willing to do was separate from the past, our legacy way of doing things, separate from that, and leverage best practice recommendations from a best-in-class vendor like Salesforce.com. And it enabled us to fundamentally transform and improve the way we run business, run the front office at BMC Software. So the scope summary of what we accomplished: we've got 2 business units that had slightly different sales processes. We were able to model that surprisingly simple with record types in Salesforce.com. Product family forecasting, that was huge. I don't know if you guys have seen that. If you haven't, I encourage you to get a good demo of the product or the customizable forecasting module, and I'm going to show a little bit about exactly how we use it a little bit later when I put sort of what I call a proof point on the board about what we've done. And begin with the end in mind. Always think about the intelligence that you want to pull out of the system. What I tell people all the time is nobody ever got any value from putting information into a system. Where you get the value is when you pull it out. And again, that's going to be one of my proof points when we get about 2 slides down the road. And I've got this up here. Guys, if you want a rapid implementation and you want to get it done in 90 days or some reasonable time frame, you've got to manage scope. And it's an easy thing to say. It's a tough thing to do. So here's how we did it. Functional project plan of how we ran this sprint successfully in 90 days. not going to speak to every box on the screen. I do want to speak to the green and the red. First, the red, what I consider the critical path. It's all about data, right? How are you going to do your data migrations? What's your strategy? What needs to go into the new world? What are you going to leave behind? How do you subset it? How do you do the data transformations, the data migrations? That's the long pole in the tent, guys. It's a tough one. And then once you get all of your data strategy worked out, then you know, how are you going to synchronize it back to the mothership, right? Your data center has to know some of the things that are happening in the cloud. What are going to be your procedures to get that information back to the mothership? That's the long pole in the tent. At least it was in our experience. Now for the green, the good stuff. Executive sponsorship. You got to have it. You got to have it because there are going to be challenges to managing scope and keeping the project on track. And if you have strong senior leadership that's willing to support a project team, you can get there. But you do need the strong sponsorship. And then I've got the joint application development. That's one of the third piece in the butterfly slide. The rapid configuration capabilities of Salesforce.com to sit down with reps, do these joint application development sessions, and get them engaged and recognizing that they can influence the way that we're doing things is huge. And it's a capability I found in the cloud that I didn't feel like we had in data center applications. Governance model, John talked about it. You've heard it all week. I'm not going to talk a lot about governance. I do want to point out one thing on this slide. Right here in the middle, and also the base pillar in the pyramid, if you will. Salesforce.com has many very qualified delivery partners, and I'm sure they're all very good at what they do. We had the benefit of working with Aperio in our experience, and they were great. There's a couple of them in the room today, but they came in, they listened to what we wanted to do, they listened to what we didn't want to do, and they translated that into a nice 90-day project plan, helped us execute. They transferred knowledge, transferred skills, and got us done on time and within budget. And by the time they left, we were completely ready to support the application on our own. So, results. Everybody joined together, every functional area that was affected, hands together in the cloud. We reached over 1,450 users in 40 countries within 3 months. This third bullet point here, I really want to call it out. We've gotten to a point where we don't train on the tool anymore. That's very different from our previous legacy environment. We get sales reps, and we teach them the sales process. This is how we want you to move an opportunity through the pipeline. We spend a little time doing that. It's important that they follow the right process. And then we pull up Salesforce.com, and we say, oh, yeah, and by the way, here's a simple, easy-to-use tool that just models everything we talked about in terms of sales process. And that's all we do in training anymore. By keeping it simple, making it all about the sales rep, we have really, really improved the way we run things. So, proof points. Mark Benioff talked about them yesterday in his presentation, and I thought he was spot on. These are two huge proof points around how we transform the way we run front office operations. So, we got our key metrics incorporated into our dashboards that are important. We thought about them prior to deployment as we were doing our configurations. And so now we have one standard dashboard where the way we did our quarterly business reviews in the past is maybe the way you guys, a lot of people do it, is everybody goes and prepares their slide decks, and they come in, and there's 6 versions of the truth, and you don't know exactly who has the right information. I see some smiles in the audience. Well, we did that too a year ago. Not anymore at BMC Software. We've got our key metrics baked into our dashboards, and when we're ready to do a quarterly business review, we get the right people in the room, we change the running user on the dashboard, we hit refresh, and there's one version of truth on the wall, and those are the business metrics we talk to and manage to. Materially improved the way that we run front office operations. The forecast comes straight from the system. If you haven't seen a good demo of the customizable forecast module, I encourage you to go see it. It's terrific. It starts out with the pipeline information, moves up through layers of management. Everybody can apply their judgment. adjust up, adjust down, make some comments, and by the time we're done, we're pulling a number straight out of the system, no offline spreadsheets. We're retaining all of that institutional knowledge all inside of Salesforce.com. We are off of spreadsheets. So some critical success factors. You've got to have the strong executive sponsorship. You've got to be willing to lead the change, guys. Separate from the past. Let go of legacy processes. And have the courage to step out and lead some change within the organization. I always like to just reiterate, begin with the end in mind. It's all about reports and dashboards. As you're working through your project, make sure you're provisioning to be able to pull the intelligence out that you want. And don't over-engineer the system, right? That was our experience in our legacy environment. We learned from it, and we just embraced the power of the platform, and it has worked out terrifically at BMC Software. So quickly caterpillar into a butterfly, leverage out of box, and be willing to separate from legacy processes. Committed project leads with known escalation paths and sponsorship, the seeds of new life, the agents of change, if you will. Leverage the configurability, build prototypes, get some involvement from some end users, rapid iterations. It's terrifically powerful capabilities in the cloud that we did not have in our legacy environment. And get your change leaders on board early and make sure they're a big part of what you're doing. Farjat?
Thank you. Hear me okay? I'm Parajat Sharma with Seagate Technology. I'm a manager with the Sales Initiatives team. I want to tell you a little bit about what I do so that you understand my perspective on global transformation. I think it's important because the way IT sees it or the way a sales VP would see it is very different from the way that I see it. And being in Sales Initiatives, which is part of the broader sales operations team, I am responsible for a limited set of budget resources to manage an ecosystem of platforms and applications that support certain processes at Seagate. So sales is my customer, and I am IT's customer, if that makes sense. So in other words, I'm responsible for what sales gets, even though I don't actually execute the implementations, which is an interesting spot. So a little bit about Seagate, because I think even though we're in the high-tech session today, we're quite different from a software company being a manufacturing company. So I want to highlight that. We design, manufacture, and sell storage. So all the hard drives that you have in your computers and your DVRs, enterprise systems, even Salesforce.com, all the storage that companies have or we have at home in our cars is hard drive. Obviously, flash is coming on strong, but core storage is still on hard drive. We make them. We sell them. We compete with Western Digital and Hitachi. They're our biggest customers and just biggest competitors. And just for reference sake, we shipped our 1 billionth drive in 2007. We sell about 250 million units every quarter. 47,000 employees, a very highly leveraged sales team. We have $10 billion revenue, but we only support that $10 billion with about 250 sales reps. The channels that we sell in, we have distribution. That's 30% of our business. We sell to the indirect channel through distribution. The rest comes from about 60% from named accounts like Dell and IBM and Sun, or Oracle now. And the rest, 10%, comes from the branded space. So if you go to Costco and Best Buy, the drive that you see sitting there is branded. So that's kind of our makeup. And our sales teams, and I'll get into that next. Just to set the context, since I focus on sales, my perspective, again, comes from transformation in or impacting the sales team. So sales is specialized by regions. We have EMEA, APAC, Americas, and then a global OEM team. Sales reps there have named accounts. There is a small territories component where reps are responsible for managing patch of ground, so there are some hybrid reps. There is a support service. Because we're manufacturing, a lot of our deals and customer relationship is dependent on getting products supplied to our customers on a timely basis. So logistics plays a key role in our operations, which is a bit different than some of the software companies in that we don't quite generate leads like you do in other businesses, and we have this run rate business that we need to manage, and the way you manage a run rate business is by making sure that products are getting delivered on a timely basis. So that part is managed by our sales support function. It is a shared services that sits within the regions. Between sales and sales support, which is called account management, we have a number of systems that they operate with to conduct business. You can think of the sales process. Different parts of the sales process are catered to by different sets of systems. So one difference, again, with regards to BMC, we're sort of a consensus-driven company. It's hard to put a mandate and say, this is what you're going to use. So there are pockets of, I like to call, there are fiefdoms, and there are systems in those fiefdoms. And so to succeed at Seagate, you have to make your system or platforms work with other systems. So that's kind of the lay of the land, if I may. And then, once again, because of these reasons, there are varying degrees of automation. So some processes are more automated than others. And I'll get into more of how we are more automated than others because of Salesforce.com. And then just recently, we went through an org restructure, which means the number of reps have come down, the number of support teams have come down, but in reality, the actual amount of work still remains the same because the dollar values have come down, the volumes have come down, but the steps that you go through to make those numbers still kind of remain the same. So the work hasn't gone away. So that's our sales team. Let's talk about the sales rep, and I see that as my enterprise challenge from where I sit. With the restructured sales team, obviously everybody's trying to figure out their roles and make sense of what they do. A day in a life would be come into office or go visit a client site, coordinate with product line marketing or management to relay the customer needs because we are a manufacturing company. A lot of our products are designed into our customers' products. Reach out to marketing, get collateral or supporting material to go have a conversation with the customer. Reach out to pricing and ask for the most favorable pricing that you can get on behalf of your customer. Reach out to logistics, make sure that products are being shipped from China, that's where our factories are, into the JIT hubs and other fulfillment channels. Work with all these legacy systems, and then if it's commissions time every quarter, reach out to the commissions team if you think there's an issue with how much you're being paid out. Right, so that's kind of the day in a life, and that's why this Seagate rep has 6 hands. I don't quite agree with the shopping bags, but that's our personal business. Doing a lot with a lot less is my typical customer. And so this is how I see the customer base, not just the reps, but also the support reps. Everybody's a hero at Seagate because they come in every morning and try to get their work done, no matter how bad or inefficient the processes are, and everybody's trying to make their piece happen. But at the same time, because they're experts at what they do, they have a specific way that they want to work in. It's, once again, going back to not being a mandate shop. We are a consensus-driven. We kind of let our employees work the way they would like to work as long as the end goal is being met. So that's kind of my world. And this is the constituents that I serve, be it sales or sales support. So the common theme across all constituents is everybody wants to get to information in the shortest possible way. And information can be data. Information can be initiating a workflow. Information can be where does my request stand in a workflow with regards to others that sit in that. Information can be content and collateral. So really, my role is to get all this information in a single place and deliver it to the customers in the shortest possible path, if that makes sense.
Actually, Parj, I think
ahead.
it's an important point because I know within your project, the solution that you delivered, you got a lot of superheroes. Everybody had their own way of doing things, and fighting crime, for keep with your analogy. Did you have a standardization challenge? And how did you
Yes,
deal
we
with it?
did. We did. So standardization is important because the process, so this is a great question, John, because the process is standardized. We don't want to deviate from it, and we are a Six Sigma company, so we go through the process mapping phase where we identify what are non-critical steps and take them out. So the process is very standardized, but how you impact or go about executing that process varies. So when it comes to user training, we, once again, like Burke mentioned with BMC, we kind of focus on the process, but we let users carry out the process in different ways. So it is standardized from a process perspective, but not how you carry it out. And that's a subtle difference because, and the way I can explain it better is with Salesforce.com, you have certain redundancies built in. I don't see that as a negative. Like, to give you an example, you have that top right tab, and you can get to a custom object from that tab. You have, or that drop down. You have those tabs. You have that recent item. So there are many ways you can get to an account, just as an example. So we don't go tell people to get to an account in just one way, and they can choose whichever works for them. So if that answers your question from,
Yep.
Okay. All right. So since we're at Dreamforce, I thought maybe I should talk about infrastructure and how critical or what the critical success factors are from the perspective of infrastructure, fully recognizing the importance of executive leadership and scope management, right? So having said all that, given my role, given the fact that my company has given me limited budget and resources, I find infrastructure to be very critical in making me successful. And here are the 4 things that are critical success factors. One is, do you own it? The impact of owning infrastructure when your business is rapidly evolving. I think there are 2 schools of thought. I subscribe to the one that it's better not to own it and have the specialists do what they need to in terms of managing the infrastructure. Had I not done that, and even now I have some applications that are not part of the Salesforce ecosystem, I struggle with getting changes made because I have to reach out to the vendor, get a new licensing contract, and buy more features or suites and have them deployed, and that's additional workload. And I would rather just focus on managing the processes and application build out. So in our case, not owning the infrastructure has been beneficial. The second point, does it work? Access to best practices and ability to quickly apply to your business. It's always good to partner with individuals or companies that have experienced your problem in the past. And I see that with Salesforce in terms of the customer success managers or even the sales reps and the account teams that they have, because they have been to different clients and can understand see your problem from the lens of others, other companies, and kind of replay it back to you and help you evolve. So I think that's also been very good, as opposed to building everything from scratch and trying to figure out the processes from scratch in-house. So one of the things that's worked for us is outsourcing these specialized jobs to vendors like Salesforce or partners of Salesforce. The third thing, once again, related to infrastructure is, can you get it approved? Every time that I get a new requirement, I have to go to my VP to get an approval. It's a tough conversation to have because it's got budget dollars associated with it, and those are not easy to come by. So the solution here, what works for me, is with Salesforce.com, I can easily extend the platform with a limited set of development resources, and no one really knows, what went into that effort because it's not costing them incremental dollars more often than not, unless you partner with vendors, right? So it lets you fly under the radar and get things done. And then can you sell it? Getting maximum usage and adoption. This is also key because if you bring in, so we tried the best of breed approach. And we struggled with it because every time a user had to go and learn a new system, new set of processes, that negatively impacted adoption. Having it all within the Salesforce ecosystem has actually helped us drive adoption, and it's an easier sell, less to train on. As a matter of fact, off late, we have stopped training altogether on new processes and systems. We make 5-minute videos, put it on Salesforce content. Users download them, watch the videos, and they know what to do. And we're trying to go the Amazon or the Benioff example yesterday that system should be as easy as Amazon.com's website. That's kind of what we're trying to do with our platform. So the criticality of infrastructure is key to success, and I wanted to highlight that.
I assume you followed an iterative approach and maybe give a sense of duration or how you develop the consensus around it.
Yeah, so we do both. If it's a minor, as I mentioned, the development is managed by IT, and being a Six Sigma shop, we have a very well-defined way of evolving or developing systems. Along with that, since cloud computing is catching on at Seagate, we have also started iterating quite a bit. Iterative development where we can roll out on a weekly basis. So some of the smaller developments or changes are rolled out on a weekly basis every Thursday or Friday morning for US. And that's iterative. But if it's a big project that has a lot of compliance issues or requires finance involvement, we do it on a slower track in a more of a big bang approach. So we have a mixed breed on development.
And how are you prioritizing those releases?
The prioritization happens at our SMC Council, which is Sales Marketing Customer Support Council. Each business lead goes with his or her set of priorities. We meet our IT counterparts. They load their project stack. They see how much they can do and whether there are conflicts. If there are conflicts, they let us know. And as business leads, we have to agree among ourselves as to which is more important. So it's a little bit of lobbying and horse trading that happens at that. But SMC is where that happens, and once it's decided in that council, the decisions are made, and we go and implement. All right. So just to make it all real, this is how all of our effort manifests. It's in the form of our sales center. It's the hub for all sales activities. The idea being that every morning when a sales rep comes in, he or she logs into the sales center. And gets to carry out any operation that they might have as an employee of Seagate. So this is a Visualforce page that has Salesforce.com content sitting in the back end of it. This was just rolled out this October, last month. As you can see, it has executive communications on the top. So that's our EVP, Kurt Richards, in the shades. Every month or quarter, if he has a presentation, that gets loaded on this site, so users can easily get to it. He's also started writing a blog. So we have a link from here to his blog, and reps love it because this is their way of engaging with senior leadership, which they rarely get to because they're all working out of home and in far-flung areas. Applications. On the left-hand side, we have all the critical applications that our sales reps need. Some of these are within Salesforce.com, others aren't, and this goes back to my earlier point that we live in a consensus world. It's an ecosystem of applications and platforms. We have to bring them all together with a common face, and this is the common face for the sales rep. Collateral, this is big. Salesforce.com content has been a big success at Seagate. In the past, collateral was disparate. There were multiple repositories. Engineering ran its own Lotus Notes Quicker database. There were wiki sites. There were other applications, including E2Open. It was hard to bring it all together for our sales reps. So we started with Salesforce.com content and identified all key content for our reps, posted them here, made it easy for them to search. So you see search on the bottom middle left, parametric search as well as keyword-based search. At the same time, what we're doing is we're thinking of partnering with Google and bringing their one box that would allow us to crawl not just Salesforce content, but also other repositories at Seagate and make that one box search utility available from this page. And that would be very powerful because now or then, we would have opened all repositories to our sales reps from a single search box. So that's in the development. Instead of integrating directly to Salesforce. So some of it is integrated, so there is a lot of data exchange happening. But some of the applications, for example, forecasting, we don't do forecasting in Salesforce.com. Forecasting happens in Manugistics, which is an Oracle application. So we have to live with it. And what's the easiest way to get a rep to Manugistics? We don't want them to log in, into a separate application. This is single sign-on. They come to this page, they click that Manugistics link. Their parameters are passed over to Manugistics. We made some customization on that end, and they get to their accounts and can, enter their data. And from a reporting standpoint, some data elements that were captured in Manugistics then feed back into Salesforce. So it's a complex integration that we work with. But good question, because this is the key here is it's all single sign-on. Recognition is big. Reps love recognition, so we have tried to. So we have standing ovations. Terry Page is one of our account management managers, and she has been recognized. So it's a good way. It sets up some sort of a competition between employees, and it's right there. And Salesforce allows us to manage the workflow for submitting a recognition, getting it approved, and putting it up here. And productivity tools. So feedback, top right. Getting to hear from the sales teams as opposed to holding con calls over and over again. We let the feedback button do it. We let them see feedback, and that's Salesforce ideas behind the feedback button. My tasks, and then general. Sorry, not general, but very specifically. All these components, containers that you see, are critical functions that support sales. So we have given them real estate on this homepage. So it's kind of like a newspaper front page. Everybody has a little section, and they get to say to the sales teams what's most important, either to them or for the sales team. So that kind of is a great productivity enhancer, because it's right there every morning. You get to see what's being said by pricing or commissions or corporate marketing, so on and so forth. You have a lot of questions. Any questions? Good. All right. Case study. I want to mention just give you a overview of one of the applications that's built within Salesforce.com. So last year, this time, we had an economic meltdown. There was a significant impact on our business. We lost about 30% of our revenue. Our management decided to change our approach, our strategy, and we said we're not going to chase volume anymore. We're not going to chase market segment, but we're going to go for share quality and profitability, which meant scaling back from certain customers and focusing on customers that make us profitable, that give us better margins on our products. But to do that, we lacked critical data elements. We did not know who the customers are, what are they buying, and what's their outlook in terms of future growth or future demand. And this may be unique to you because you're thinking, well, what about forecasting? We don't quite forecast bottoms up in our industry. We forecast tops down. So there's a company or a research group called HDDA, and HDDA gets data from all the competitors. They aggregate the data. They don't divvy up, who reported what, and then they say, well, this is what the total available market for hard drive looks like, and then we kind of take that data and figure out how much we should build to sell into the market. So it's a very tops-down approach. But with this profitability goal, top-level management goal, we had to figure out a way to capture certain attributes, product attributes, and their demand across our key customers. And so we went with Salesforce.com Apex Visual Force-based solution that, by the way, was built by Apereo, Richard Wood Apereo. What it allows is for a sales rep to come to Salesforce, go to his account, pull up this screen, which is very similar to Excel because everybody loves working with Excel, and enter data. So they can tab from one row to the other. They can expand or contract depending on what they need to fill out and what they don't, and be done with updates on a product, by quarter, by market segment basis, and close out of this application, right? So they have done their job. Rather than sending Excel spreadsheets to their sales admins and then into product marketing, so on and so forth, they just come here, update it, and we aggregate it at a revenue planning and market research level to make sure and to understand what the inputs are from the street, and then triangulate that with the HDDA data. So the tops down and the bottoms up gets triangulated with this application. Right, and this may be a little confusing to most of you, but the key point here is with Salesforce.com, we were able to build this app in about 6 weeks' time, and then deliver it, train and deliver it to users across the globe, about 70 users, and it's been working with 100% adoption as part of the culture now. And we were able to achieve that.
And there was nothing you had planned for. It was
it
responding
wasn't
to the
planned
market.
for, right? It wasn't part of our SMC prioritization cycle. It just happened. We had to we had to get it done. We, rather than trying to figure it out ourselves, we went to Salesforce.com, found Apereo, partnered with them, and delivered this in a very short period of time with very minimal budget. Not to say, not right. Hopefully you don't use that as a bargaining chip, but all right. Key takeaways for us: have clearly defined goals, no doubt. I've seen a lot of projects being delivered with in ambivalence. People don't really know what it's going to do. It's a good to have. And some of these Salesforce features are also good to have, and I don't promote those. If I find there's no need for them, I don't want to use my employee base as a test bed for those, so we kind of pull back. So let's have a clearly defined goal before we go execute. Align business and IT, very critical. Again, for me, because IT is my doer, so having that alignment and good partnership goes a long way. Having a fixed process to do that, like SMC, is helpful, but then again, you also need the relationship with the IT manager. So invest in that. I think that's helpful. No perfect solution. Have a bias for action, meaning if you send it to your traditional IT team, they're going to try and build the best solution and figure out all the corner cases and make sure that the system addresses those corner cases. Well, it's great, but 80%, 90% of our business is not driven by corner cases. So we focus on that and get that built out and delivered in a timely basis. If those corner cases are required, we treat them as enhancements and get it done in parallel. Complexity of solution is not indicative of value add. What this means is, oftentimes there's this perception. Maybe it's in the DNA of a large organization, but we love to brag about how complex projects we're running, and use that as a justification for our team, our existence, and everything that we do. And in reality, when you go talk to a sales rep or the sales executive team, we find that their needs aren't that complex, and we're over-engineering our systems in anticipation, in the hopes of delivering a great product, which, by the way, then is not so great because the user has difficulty understanding it. So keep it simple, like Burke said, and understand that complexity is not an indicator or not a driver of value add. Have best possible data management practices. Everybody's struggling with data management because we work with distributors globally. The Americas distributor typically has a better way of providing us data, more thorough data, as opposed to a distributor in Asia. So we struggle with that, and you have to overlay all these data sets with standard practices that allow you to aggregate and make sure you have a good view of the data. So very critical. Unless you can build the best application, if you don't have good data in those, it's not going to work for you. And then seek help in terms of partners and CSM. Like I mentioned earlier, don't try and do everything in-house. First off, it's going to be a resource drain. It's going to affect your morale, for employee morale. It's going to be time-consuming, and you will probably not leverage best practices. So go and find partners that you can work with, you have faith in, who kind of match your cultural setup, and then make them part of your ecosystem. And then that's it.
Great. Burke, Parashah, thank you so much. I think we have a few minutes for some questions. We tried to highlight today two projects, two global projects, right, that had transformational impact on the organization, and key under fundamental principles being they took a fast, iterative approach and tried to do it all at once. They had the right roadmap to kind of build that consensus, to go global, stick with the priorities for each release, manage scope. I liked your graphic, Bert. And finally having a strong governance model around making sure that the right priority. I think with that said, though, do we have any questions for our speakers?
Question for Bert. Can you expand on multi-language and multi-currency? You mentioned that. So how many languages do you have, and how many currencies do you have?
I believe it's 14 currencies. So everything is managed in local currency and translated into USD. So when we start to roll up that forecast in the forecast module I talked about, everybody has a common baseline on what they're seeing. And then the multi-language, we've enabled the capability for end users to populate certain fields like account name in their local language, including the Asian character sets, the double byte characters. So it's just more intuitive to them to see the name in Mandarin than it is in English. So.
Good. Did you have a question?
That's correct. So sorry.
Maybe repeat the question.
The question is if forecasting is done in Salesforce or not. And the answer is traditionally, because we need to impact our build plan, forecasting happens in Manugistics. But at the same time, there is some sales forecasting, like I showed you with the CIR application that happened in Salesforce.com. But those are point needs. It's not our true forecast, which is going directly into Manugistics. But at the same time, we're pulling back certain data elements for reporting and dashboarding purposes from Manu into Salesforce.com. So. Okay, so my short answer on that, my short answer on that is, if you have multiple product layers, are you in manufacturing? If you have multiple product layers and if you have lots of SKUs and part numbers, we have a 4-layer product hierarchy, and so reps may forecast at any level depending on what their business is. If you can bring in that level of complexity or product relationship into Salesforce, do it. If not, let it be in whatever the system is, because, like I said, consensus-driven company, we don't want to take on these fiefdoms, but we want to coexist. So we have let that be. But critical data elements that are required for dashboarding purposes, we just pull into Salesforce. It's kind of what we do.
And if you have a few minutes after this, I could talk about other examples with other clients doing it various ways, using hybrid or one or the other, and reasons why. Were there any other questions? Go ahead, sir.
Through your iterative development process, what do you guys find is the best way to communicate the changes to your global users?
So a couple of ways. Emails and phone calls are what we, or conference calls are what we typically go with. But we also have a Sales Center Express that comes out of the Sales Center. So every new update is given sort of a business bent and communicated to the business user. So as opposed to giving a project update, we're really saying, hey, for this particular pricing process, you weren't able to do such and such. Now you will be. So email and phone call combined with a newsletter that goes out on a weekly basis.
How long did it take you guys to get the digital sign-off on the spec, being a global deployment? Or how detailed did you guys go to get that spec done? Or did you guys do more like revisions once you had a major rollout, to make everybody happy?
Great question. I mean, for us, like I said, 80-20 rule. We try and time bound our requirements. We call in our execs or leaders or whoever's required to come up with the requirements for a process. Agree on the 80% and go start the development track. If there are additional incremental requirements, we either try to negotiate with IT to add them to the existing project. If not, we treat them as future minor releases.
Yeah, I think we have a somewhat consistent answer. We went light on specific requirement gathering, and we went heavy on something that was introduced to us by Aperio as business process modeling. And we worked with senior leadership to define a future state of how the front office operations should be managed, and documented it very clearly, and then took that out and socialized it with some key super users around the world and got consensus buy-in that this is a future state, best-in-class operating model. And that became the foundation around which how we configured the application. So it wasn't detailed requirement gathering at all. It was business process modeling.
Was it within the 90 days that you talked about?
Yep.
The second question is, did you guys face any integration challenges? I think in both cases there are a lot of backend systems. Was that a long pole in the tent? Because I didn't see any on the slides.
It may have been subtle, but on the project timeline that I put up, the 2 red bars were all about getting the data migrations done, and then once the data is in the magic cloud in the sky, you've got to have your synchronization protocols to bring it back. Whether there's a couple different ways to get it done, but yeah, that's in our experience that was the critical path to getting it done in 90 days.
I have just a slight different perspective on that. Integration is a challenge. I think it's a challenge for the IT team. From where I sit, my challenge is to make sure that integration resources that are shared resources are allocated to my project so that they don't impact my timelines.
We're going to be here for more questions, but we have an iPod to give away. I'm getting the hook.